Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to assemble this Airfix 1/76 scale King Tiger. The reason I bought this model is because after the disappointing result from other Airfix kits, people recommended me this King Tiger as an example of a good kit from Airfix. So I figured why not get one and have a look. We can see on the front of the box the image depicts a King Tiger with the early turret. This is often called the Porsche turret, though I believe it was made by Krupp and not Porsche. The back of the box doesn't really have anything interesting. It's mostly just a bunch of Airfix Club stuff. Let's look at what's inside the box. There are 3 sprues, 4 if you count the upper hull, inside this protective plastic bag, and as you can see, in this case the bag has served its purpose. One of the drive sprockets has fallen off the sprue and been caught in the bag. This is sprue A, and it contains the hull sides and rear, along with various other detaily bits. I will admit that I'm actually kind of surprised by these sprues. They're neat, well detailed, and have minimal mold lines. This is very different to the Airfix Calliope I built a while ago. Sprue B contains all the wheels. All the wheels. There are a lot of these, not really a lot to say. They're round and detail is good. The drive sprockets do seem to have a tendency to fall out of the sprue though. Sprue C has both halves of the turret, which is quite nicely detailed. I like the detailing of the interlocking armor plates. There are also more detaily things, including the gun, which I guess is an important thing to have. There's also the hull bottom, which is again well detailed. This is unlikely to ever be seen, but the details are still nice to have. The upper hull is kind of its own sprue. The sprue connection parts on the mudguards are kind of annoying because they're a little bit big, but they're not too bad. The hull is really quite nicely detailed, particularly on the top. There's a bit of flash on the side skirts, but this should be pretty simple to clean up. The grills on the engine deck look reasonable to me. There's even mesh moulded into the round thing in the center rear behind the hatch. The front of the hull is pretty nice too. The hatches are very neat, and I quite like that the cable for the headlamp is moulded on, unlike the Tamiya King Tiger I built a while ago, for which I had to make my own. The most unfortunate thing about this kit is the fact that it comes with the dreaded rubber band tracks. I'm really hoping these go on the model nicely. The rest of the parts look really good, and it would be a shame to have the model ruined by poorly fitting tracks. That said, the detailing on them actually looks pretty good. There is a bit of flash along the edges of the track, and being this rubbery stuff you can't really just scrape it off, but they do look pretty decent otherwise. The instructions are about what I would expect from an Airfix kit. There are 2 pages of actual instructions. They're pretty easy to understand and follow. On the back pages are 2 painting guides for a couple of different camo schemes, and I like that these are in colour. And finally, there's this sheet of decals. I like that there's a set of numbers with a green background, which I guess is to represent either wiped away whitewash or dust. Other than that, not a huge variety of markings, but they should get the job done well enough. Let's get to building this thing. The instructions suggest starting with the lower hull, and who am I to disagree? There's nothing especially tricky about this. Trim off any sprue gate remains and then glue the hull sides to the hull bottom. There are raised guide parts on the back of the hull sides to help position this, though do pay attention to make sure you've got these parts on at a 90-degree angle. It'd be easy to glue these on just a little bit wonky. Next comes the hull rear. It very simply slips into place using the guide parts on the hull sides. Now we can move on to the wheels. It makes sense to attach the inner road wheels first, obviously. So I do that. I apply glue to the axle parts, and then slot the wheels on with the detailing facing towards the hull. I put these on a little differently than the instructions suggest. They say to do one side at a time, but I'm going to do all of the parts for both sides at the same time. What I mean by this is I'm going to apply all of part 8 at once on both sides, then all of part 9 and so on. Each road wheel is made up of 2 parts, so the next part I attach is the outward facing half of the inner road wheels. Unsurprisingly, this goes on just as easily as the inner half. I think attaching the wheels like this results in less potential for confusion and attaching the wrong wheels in the wrong place. The inner road wheels go on every second axle, starting with the second axle from either end of the tank. Next, I add the inner half of the drive sprocket. This part should go on before the outermost road wheels, because there will be some overlap between those parts, and it would be hard to push the drive sprocket past the first road wheel. I then follow the instructions and add all 3 parts of the idler wheel. I was hoping there wouldn't be any interference with the rearmost road wheel. The way this idler wheel goes together is pretty simple. The outermost wheel has keying to ensure the spokes align with the spokes on the middle wheel. Looks very much like a King Tiger idler wheel, which is not surprising. Next, I add these hub-like things to each of the axles of the inner road wheels. I'm not sure exactly what these are, but I guess they're a hub for another set of outer road wheels for extra wide tracks or something. Whatever they are, they're easy to attach. You might not be surprised to learn that the next step is to add the outer road wheels. Like the inner road wheels, these come in two pieces, and again, they're very easily glued together. There was no issue getting the rearmost wheel into place past the idler wheel. Just look at all those wheels. They look really good. Wait, I made that joke last week. The last of what seems like a billion wheel parts are the outer halves of the drive sprockets. These are keyed to fit the inner part so they will mesh properly with the track parts, and they went together with no issues. Now for the tracks. I figured attaching these before the hull top goes on would be the best way to do this. The side skirts on the upper hull would definitely get in the way of the tracks. Assembling the tracks themselves was a little bit tricky. One end of the tracks has a kind of T-shaped part that slots through a hole in the other end. I had to use tweezers and pretty much force the T part through the hole. The joint is a little bit messy looking, but it could definitely be worse. I added super glue to hold this together. I was really hoping this T connection would be good and strong and hold the tracks together when I stretched them over the wheels, which is what I did next. This wasn't especially hard, though I did have to stretch the tracks a fair bit to get them to go on. I'm always a little bit scared that I'm going to break something when doing this, especially on a smaller scale model like this. It's pretty easy to break the wheels off at the axles. I put these on with the join in the tracks on the upper side because I figured the side skirts would hide the join point. It is pretty sloppy looking. To be honest, I was surprised to see that the tracks stayed connected. I add super glue along the bottom of the wheels, press the tracks down onto the wheels, and then put the model on my desk with some weights to make sure the tracks stayed flat. A couple of old D-cell batteries make for good weights. Next, I glue the track down onto the upper part of the road wheels. I used my tweezers and a knife to hold the track down while it bonded. The result is certainly not the prettiest looking, but the upper part of the tracks won't really be visible later anyway thanks to the side skirts on the upper hull. Before I can attach the upper hull, the ball mount for the hull machine gun needs to be glued into place, and this has to be done from the inside of the hull. It slots into place easily enough. There is a bit of a gap all the way around the part. This can later be filled with green stuff or your putty of choice. I then glued the upper and lower halves of the hull together. I had to hold the front of the hull together with a fair amount of force while the glue set in order to avoid having a huge gap there. There is still a gap there, which doesn't look all that great, but it's not too huge and at a distance it's kind of hard to see. If you're going to fill the gap around the machine gun ball, then you might as well fill this at the same time. Next, I install the hull machine gun in a very out of focus way. This is obviously a tiny part, so tweezers are helpful here. Looks pretty good to me. Next comes the headlamp. This goes into the T-shaped mounting point in the front of the hull. I rather like that this model has the cable for the headlight. It's a nice touch. The 1/35th scale Tamiya King Tiger I built didn't have this and I had to make my own cable. I then add the front towing shackles. These are really tiny, so be careful with these when removing them from the sprue and cleaning them up. They're pretty easy to clip onto their mounting point. A little nudging to straighten them up and they look pretty neat. Next I install the mesh covers that go over the air intakes. These are very easy to place, aided by the handy guide pins in the hull. If you want to leave this part off, you could easily just shave down those guide pins. This part is really quite nicely detailed. I mean, it's not see-through like actual mesh, but it does look very good. I was actually a little surprised by this, to be honest. Next, the rear of the hull needs some detailing. I start by adding these shackles. They go on just as nicely on the rear as they did on the front, and they're just as fragile. Then I install the jack here at the bottom of the hull. Not really a lot to say about this, other than it goes into place very easily. Next come the exhaust pipes. Both of the exhausts are the same and will fit into either hole. They are still keyed though to ensure they can only be glued in vertically. There is still a little bit of play in the parts though, so they might need a little bit of adjustment before they're sitting nicely in place. To finish off the hull, I add these cover things that go over the base of the exhausts. The pins on these ensure that you put the correct part on the correct side of the tank. You can see the cover on the tank's right has two protrusions on the bottom of it. No idea what they're for, but they are there. Now let's see about that turret. I glue the base of the gun part to the turret floor, and then this part, whatever you might call it, goes over the top. I've glued all of this together, but if you want, you could glue only the top part and leave the gun base part free to elevate and depress. But as usual, I didn't bother with that. Next, I glue the turret top to the bottom part. It does fit, though there's a little bit of lateral play in this part, so I tried to get it as centered as possible. Then comes the turret front. The sides of this part don't quite line up perfectly with the sides of the turret. It's not a huge difference, but it's noticeable enough if you look closely. I pressed the turret sides in a little bit to try and reduce that misalignment. You may want to try and fix this with some sanding or filing. I glue in the commander's hatch next. This part goes into place easily enough, and you can of course model this open if you would prefer that. This is followed by the installation of the machine gun ring, which also goes into place quite nicely. For some reason there is no machine gun to go with this, but I'm not bothered by that too much. Next comes what I assume is a vision device cover. It slides into place here relatively easily, though maybe tweezers would have been a good idea for these small parts. Then the ventilator goes on here, just next to the commander's cupola. Again, tweezers could be used, but you can obviously do it with fat fingers too. Now, my turret crew can breathe, even when Hans farts. I then glue this teeny tiny speck of plastic to the side of the bulge under the commander's cupola. There's nothing to guide this and I'm not sure what it's for. Maybe it's a cover for a pistol port or something like that. I was tempted to leave this off, but I figured I might as well add it. Surely this could have been molded into the turret part itself. Next comes the hatch on the rear of the turret. You probably won't be surprised to learn that this part is really easy to install, though the fit is a little tight, so I did have to apply a bit of pressure to get it into place. You can only model this one closed, which is fine by me. Then it's time for the gun, which comes in two parts. Half of the muzzle brake will need to be glued on. There isn't really anything to guide this part precisely, but it's pretty obvious if you've got it wrong. It doesn't look perfectly neat, especially if you look really closely. Once the glue has dried, you could file it down and fill in any areas that need it to improve this part if you feel like going to that effort. I don't usually do that in these videos because they're more about how the kit goes together than what I did to it after assembly to fill in the gaps and such. Next, I glue the gun into the mantlet. This is keyed so the muzzle brake goes on correctly. Nobody wants a misaligned muzzle brake. The next logical step then is to glue the gun and mantlet assembly into the front of the turret. Make sure it's on nice and straight, because much like muzzle brakes, nobody likes a misaligned gun. And that's it. The turret can then be locked into place with the simple locking mechanism, and that's one completed Airfix King Tiger in 1/76 scale. This is a pretty good model. For the most part, it went together quickly and easily. There weren't many mold lines needing to be cleaned up, which is definitely a nice change from some of the other Airfix kits that I've built. The details are pretty good and it looks very King Tiger-y. There are a couple of disappointments though, primarily for me the rubber band style tracks. They did actually go on okay, and to be fair, they are probably the best of this type of tracks that I've encountered in this scale, but they still don't look all that great. Maybe paint will fix that. Also, the front of the turret not quite fitting right was a little bit of a disappointment too. Other than that though, it's a pretty decent model. I'm sure nobody expects the most perfect models ever from Airfix, and there's a good reason for that, but this one is pretty good. Almost as good as their Cromwell. I bought this model because people had commented on my other Airfix kit build videos saying that this was a particularly good kit from Airfix, and I'm inclined to agree. So thanks to everybody that suggested this model. I probably won't be painting this anytime soon. I mean, I'm already in the middle of painting a much larger King Tiger, but it might see paint one day, and on that day I think it will paint up very nicely. So, what do you guys think? Have you got any other suggestions for good kits from Airfix that you would like to see me build? Or bad ones, I guess? I don't really want to buy bad ones. If you have any other comments, questions or suggestions, they are of course very welcome in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, click the thumbs up button to let me know. If you thought it was worse than a slap in the face with a piece of fish, thumbs down of course. Don't forget to subscribe if you've not done so already, and if you feel so inclined, it would be appreciated if you did things like sharing this video and my channel with anyone that might find it helpful or interesting. If you really like the videos I make, please consider helping to support the channel via Patreon at patreon.com/HerbertErpaderp. For as little as $1 a month, you can see my videos a little bit early, as well as some bonus patron-only content. You can get there by clicking the Patreon logo on screen now, or by clicking the link in the description. If not, that's okay. I hope you enjoy my videos anyway. I shall return soon, so until then, happy modelling and thanks for watching. Farewell.